Hey folks, it's Diane Gehart, and you may or may not know that way back in 2013, I was actually one of the APA trained and approved folks to train folks for the DSM-5, and actually it was AAMFT that hired me to train their folks on the new DSM-5 manual. So the DSM-5 TR came out this March, and if you didn't happen to catch that news. And so I wanted to just do a very brief update and hit some of the highlights. And if you want to know more, I do have a course that I am just about to release on this. And so, the good news with the DSM-5 TR and any text revision, it is primarily just a revision to update the text. It normally takes about 20 years to do a new DSM, and so it was 2013, it's 2020, 2022, and so we're at the 9-year mark, and they did a text update to just clarify any things that were not clear or things to help people make diagnose better. That is most of what the text revision is. They do not have free rein to just change and add lots of different diagnoses, but they did have several major diagnoses that I think are very relevant in our, I don't know, are we post-pandemic yet? I don't know, someone let me know when we are. But in this still adjusting to the pandemic and actually, I think many traumas around the world at this stage in history, I think these changes are very important for mental health professionals to know. And I am just going to quickly highlight some of these. And of course, if you want to know more, I do have a full course and you can buy the book yourself. But first and foremost, there is one new disorder. It is called prolonged grief disorder. I've already seen news articles with misinformation on the internet about this. But prolonged grief disorder is 6 months after a loss for a child, or 1 year after a loss for an adult, that the person is still having very significant grief response that is affecting their daily functioning. And so one of the articles I was reading was like, it's love, it's not a disorder. But the reason this disorder is so important is that there are millions of people grieving around the world. I believe in the United States alone, at least 200,000 children have lost either a parent or both parents to COVID-19. And this is huge. I mean, this is a lot of grief. And the important thing here is to recognize that grief, it can look like depression, but it is different. And that is why there is a disorder. And that's why it's important actually to have a specific disorder, so that people, after, grief, that it's not just being treated and labeled a major depressive disorder, which it could easily be labeled for many of these folks, and to instead properly label it as grief and have the proper types of interventions. And so even though, yes, it does come from love, like the one article said, it's love, not grief, but having this disorder will hopefully help mental health professionals, psychiatrists. The DSM really is written for psychiatrists as well as mental health professionals, to understand and work with the client in a much more compassionate and appropriate way. So it's a very important disorder, I think, at this time in history to understand well. There are also two other very important timely codes, not disorders, but codes. There are some disorders that are areas of further research and consideration around suicide and non-suicidal self-injury. But for the DSM-5 TR, there is no disorder related to suicidal behavior or self-injury, but there are Z codes, T codes, and R codes, I believe. Got the whole alphabet of codes there. And what these are doing is putting into clients' files very clearly noting if there has been suicidal behavior, not suicidal thought, but behavior, if it was current, if it was the presenting issue, if it happened after therapy started or treatment started, or if it is in the past, and the similar for the non-suicidal injury. And so this is to help us keep people safe. As we all know, that suicide is definitely on the rise. And so this is a mechanism to help professionals, especially when you work in integrated medical settings or you're communicating with other professionals, to really clearly label this in the file so that we can keep people safe. And so that is the purpose of these codes. And they are very timely at this point of history, similar to the grief disorder. So very important to understand how to use them and use them correctly. And the DSM-5 also went through, there were 2 different committees were assigned to really look at diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so there were definitely changes both to the language as well as to the data and statistics, which is, if you never read your DSM, like, it actually has good information in there in terms of prognosis, but also how different populations, how a disorder can be appear in different types of populations. So they went through and upgraded and updated all the sections. And you will see some changed language in the criteria specifically. And then there is another disorder that I think is very useful to know about, is there's now an unspecified mood disorder. This existed in the DSM-4 and DSM-4 TR. And when they revised the DSM-5 based more on actual etiology, they separated out major depressive from bipolar. And so we ended up with a depressive disorder unspecified and a bipolar unspecified, but we didn't end up with just unspecified mood disorder where you're not sure if it's going to be a major depressive, unipolar or bipolar. So we now have that option. So if you're really not sure whether it's going to be depression or bipolar, we have that code back that we lost for the last 9 years or so. So that is a new code that is also in there. And then there are lots of different disorders that went through and they cleaned up the language to make sure that there's not misdiagnosis. So, and so you'll see that there are a lot of different kind of updates to the language to clarify and to make it a lot more precise. So, and they also did remove the ICD-9 codes, since those were used for just a few months after the DSM-5 was originally published. So there are just some code, all those extra codes are taken out since no one's using them anymore. So that is a quick overview of some of the major highlights in the DSM-5 TR. And I invite you to learn more at my institute or to get the book and just make sure that you are up to date and ready to use the DSM-5 TR. Overall, I think it's not too intimidating. It wasn't horrific looking at all the changes, but there are some very important ones that I think all of us need to be aware of. So I hope this was helpful in helping to update you. Take care.